All right, good morning, and thank you all for coming. This is the third talk in a series of 4 talks. So our first talk was about the 4 stages of development that Maria Montessori developed. The second talk was last week, and that one was about the prepared environment and the prepared adult. So if you haven't had a chance to watch, especially the first talk, we have that on video, and let me know and I can email it to you if you've missed the first talk. And then today is about the development of the will and discipline. This is a great talk. And then next time, I'm not sure what the date is yet, but we'll email you guys. The next talk is going to be about the atrium and the catechesis of the Good Shepherd, which is the Montessori version of passing the faith on to the next generation. So the one thing we wanted to mention was the whole reason we're doing these talks is because the more the parents understand the Montessori method and the children are in this classroom, the more it just makes sense for the child, and there's more of a consistent approach to how to speak with them and how to encourage them and how to support them between the school and the home environment. So thank you all for coming, and I'd like to introduce Nadia Radzik.
So like Mara said, on the first talk we looked at the 4 planes of development, the path that the human person follows from conception to maturity, somewhere between the age of 24 and 25. And that at each phase of development, each 6-year phase, the human person is different, learns in a different way, and needs a different response based on where they are in their development and what they're trying to achieve. We looked at the human tendencies that Montessori identified that are operative throughout our lives. And then we've also been looking at the psychic principles: work, concentration, independence, and the 4th psychic principle. She identified 7 that govern development. The 4th psychic principle is the will, the development of the will. So naturally with this, we talk about freedom and discipline and her method of assisting the child in their developing will. So that's what we want to look at today. As a Catholic, Dr. Montessori believed and upheld what the Church has always taught about the nature of the human person and original sin, that original sin did not corrupt our nature. It's more like a wound. Yes, we have a tendency to do things that we shouldn't do. We have concupiscence, but we weren't utterly corrupted. So the will is still naturally ordered to the good and is only satisfied with the good. So she would frequently tell parents, tell adults, you know, your role as an adult is not to make your child good. Your child is already good, and they tend towards the good. What they need is an environment that allows for the release of their natural potential. And that's what we looked at last week, for some of the elements of that environment. And I just want to read a quote by her. This is from the 1946 lectures. "Children are not naughty by nature. It is the wrong treatment they receive that makes them naughty." And she would say in other places, it's their cry for defense. Something is not, a need is not being met, and they don't know that verbally. They're not conscious of it, especially in this period of the unconscious absorbent mind. Their behavior says to us something's wrong. There's a need that hasn't been met, and it's up to us to try and figure that out. Children must move and act, and so a lack of activity will result in naughty behavior. Naughtiness will disappear if we give children the right environment at a sufficiently early age. That environment must provide a great deal of mental food and warm, loving treatment. So in our plan of education for little children, we must create an attractive environment. Into this environment, we must put everything that is good for the mind, along with an understanding and affectionate person. What we advocate is the right environment and the right psychic treatment. Give this, and you will see the drama of the human soul unfold from the very beginning. The great tragedy of the child is that he is born for the environment, and the environment does not accept him. He is the potential master of the environment, and the environment is closed to him. So let's look at a few specifics. with regard to that statement. What do we mean the environment is closed to him? He's not able to take part in the environment. We looked at the intense need for movement with the young child that now, all the brain research has shown the child cannot develop properly without this immense amount of movement in the first 6 years of life, primarily the first 3 years of life. So when a child is prevented from moving, or when he's interrupted in a movement where he's repeating a certain movement over and over, they will get angry, as well they should. It's the adult who doesn't tend to understand the needs of the child. So I just want to share one story. Probably some of you have heard this, but it really struck me. I was giving a talk to some missionaries of charity, and one of the sisters, Sister John Biani, at the end of these series of Montessori talks, she said, "Now I understand why I never witnessed a temper tantrum until I came to the United States." She said, "In my village in Kenya, all of the families had there were large families, 10, 12, 14 children. Never saw a temper tantrum." And she said, "Now I know why, because the minute our children start to walk and start to participate in village life, they're welcomed. Their hand goes on that spoon to stir, and all of the adults' attitude is, yes, do this with me. Let's go collect firewood together. Yes, let's fold the clothes together." Now, this is a much more simple lifestyle than we have, which is, part of the cause of a lot of the conflict between adult and child is all of our stuff. This village didn't have electricity or plumbing, and people all lived together. But it was that attitude of welcoming the child into the work. And Dr. Montessori identified this as the first stage of the development of the will. She said the will, it develops over 3 very distinct and identifiable stages. And the first stage is the child chooses to do an activity. The adult response should be one of welcoming that activity and not interrupting it. So let's look at a couple specifics. From the very beginning, a child trying to grasp something. She said in this first stage of the development of the will, they are trying to bring mind and body together into harmony. They have the great work of man, she said, that happens in the first 6 years of life, is to make what Thomas Aquinas said, make the body the apt instrument of the soul. This takes a lot of work. So the child makes a decision to bat at a mobile. They are trying to hit the mobile. They realize through repeated actions that they have to inhibit the muscles of their arm in order to be able to hit that mobile. Or they're reaching out for a rattle, or they're reaching for mom's earring. And they try that over and over and over. And through this comes self-knowledge. I have to do it this way. And again, it's not conscious. They're impelled by this life force to be moving. But they've made a choice and they're trying to attain something. The adult should sit back and allow them to repeat that action to get the body under the control of the mind. This is a pretty long stage of development. So I can give you a couple of examples of when I've seen adults who just don't know. Nobody sets out to say, I want to corrupt my child's developing will. It's just we don't know. This isn't common knowledge. So we want to spread it. I was on an airplane one time when I was across from an adorable young couple, their first child, and the child was sitting on the father's lap. And the father had put up the tray and, done the clip for the tray. And the child became utterly fascinated with the clip on the tray. And his little hand went out. He was probably 9, 10 months old. And trying to turn it. And each time it was turning a little bit more. And you saw that his entire personality completely engaged in this task. Meanwhile, the mom saw the cloud formations out the window. And she was fascinated by the cloud formations. So she kept saying to the child, look at the clouds, look at the clouds. He's totally ignoring her. He's focused on this clip on the tray. She kept on, the dad sees the clouds, the dad's trying to break his concentration, which that wasn't the father's intention, But here is an example of the adult substituting their will for the will of the child. It's things so small like this. Finally, the father took the child's hand off and physically turned his head to the window. And of course, what do you think happened? You know, starts crying, he had work to do. He was engaged. He could care less about the clouds outside the window. The mom and dad wanted that. You know, if they had just waited, if they knew, you know, eventually he would have stopped. But every movement he was doing was a really important work. Another one I saw at a big, I think it was a Walmart, which is a horrible place to bring a young child, but the child was maybe 1.5 or 2, kind of just learning to stand well. And there were 3 bins of stuffed toys. I think it was around the 4th of July. So there was a red bin, a white bin, and a blue bin. And some of the colors had gotten mixed up. Well, there's sensitive period for order. So the child starts taking the ones that were mixed up and putting them where they should be. He was ordering these 3 bins. You know, the mother obviously didn't know and turns and sees and, you know, slaps the child's hand. Those are not yours. We don't touch things that are ours. And, you know, the child completely collapses into tears. And then what's the statement that's almost always said? Oh, you're tired. You're tired. He wasn't tired. He was trying to do work. And the adult didn't understand the value of that work. Had she known, had she, you know, had this information, you know, and step back and allow the child to order things, he would have turned and then gone on for the rest of the shopping trip. So now, you know, the more you hear these things and the more you become acquainted with what the child needs, you see these things out in public and you just think, you know, we feel so sad for the young child who's just trying to live the nature that God gave them, but the adult doesn't understand it. So this first stage of the will, allowing them, welcoming them to perform that action and not serving them, not doing the action for them. Montessori said we serve the child in an inappropriate way. Doing something for the child that they're trying to do themselves is not serving them. And she said this is a habit many adults are in. Her most repeated phrase was, any unnecessary help given is a hindrance to development. So when that child is trying to take their sock off or trying to put their sock on, we wait. It takes a long time. Those of us who are in Montessori classrooms with young children, you know, Montessori said we should have a rosary in our pocket and we should finger 10 beads before we even think of intervening. And we wait for the child to ask for help. We wait, and very often they don't. They want to get that hook in the zipper. They stop wanting to do it if the adult swoops in every time and does it for them. That doesn't help the child. She said just like they have a physical hunger, they have a psychic hunger to do for themselves. And this is, you know, part of the development of the will. The second stage in the development of the will is being able to carry out the command of another. And this, we usually see this around when the child can walk, sometimes a little bit before, when the child has learned to clap, and then we'll say, clap, clap with me, and the adult gets so excited when the child claps, you know. Then we give more and more commands. Bring mommy her purse. Where are daddy's keys? Where's my phone? And they toddle off and they get it and they bring it. They love being able to do for another, to follow out a command. And this goes on for a long time. She said they love the parent, they love the adult, and they want to cooperate with them. And this, she said, is a very important stage of development. At this stage of development, we should never give a command that the child by nature can't carry out. So to expect a 2 or 3 or a 4-year-old to sit for a long period of time or to be quiet for a long period of time is an unreasonable expectation. They can't do it. And they're not choosing to move by will. They're not making a definite decision. It's that life force, what Montessori called the horme within them, pushing them to develop. So we want to give these commands that they can carry out, because that's getting them in the habit of cooperating with another. Then she said the final stage of the development of the will is the power to obey. And she said this shows itself at the end of a long period of maturation. So our expectation for obedience really should be when the child is somewhere between 5.5 and 6, that they can consistently obey. meaning, you know, they're doing something whether they want to or not. They're in the habit of obedience. Again, being a Catholic, Montessori saw that obedience is natural to the human person. She said, we naturally want to cooperate and tend to do the right thing. It's when the environment doesn't meet our need or when the adult doesn't understand what the child is attempting. So then she identified practices that assist the child in this developing will. We already talked about welcoming their manifestations of the will, when they want to start taking the diaper off or taking clothes off. What usually gets the adult annoyed is they want to do it over and over and over. They want to take the shirt off, put it back on, take it off, put it back on, because they're just learning this practice. They're just learning how to dress themselves. A mother of a newer child in our class recently said, you know, my child came home with clothes, but the other clothes weren't dirty. I love that stage of development. When they're just learning how to do everything, especially little girls, you'll see them in the classroom, they'll get one drop of water. I have to change my clothes, gotta go. And they'll take those clothes, they'll be in the bathroom 45 minutes, changing. You know, that almost never gets to happen at home. They've got siblings banging on the door, you know, time to go, we have to leave. So that's a wonderful, and when we allow that to happen, they'll do it, you know, 5, 10, 15 times, and then they're done. That skill has been achieved, and it's not so fascinating anymore. So welcoming the manifestations. Then helping the child to build their will. This is what I think is so beautiful. She said, we all want strong-willed children. We don't want a weak-willed child. That's not going to serve the child well. So we want to cooperate with them in the building of their will. And the primary way we do this is by offering choices between two goods. Mara was just sharing with me yesterday, and she was saying this is her favorite part of this discipline talk, that Greta, you want to just share the story?
We were here last night for the bingo, and you know, they have all the shoes lined up here for the Montessori classroom, and she kept leaving the bingo room and coming down here and putting on shoes that don't belong to her, but she just really prefers these shoes to her own. And so she wore those shoes most of the night. But then it was time to go, so I thought we probably shouldn't take those home. And so we came down and she just wouldn't take them off. She wouldn't put them. Anyway, so I was just channeling my Montessori Maggie. And I was like, you know what? Either I can put them on the shelf or you can, but we need to put these on the shelf. And she was like, no, I'm not going to, you know. And I was like, that's fine. You can do it or I can do it, you know. And then she waited and then I was like, why don't I do it? And then I started to lean down. She said, I do it, I'll do it. And then she took them off and put them on the shelf and we were off. But it took a lot of like, we can either do this or this. And she said no. And then I just said, again, either this or this. And eventually she was fine. And we left the shoes and we were off. But it wasn't, you know, it's tempting to just take them off and put them back and be done.
Right, but then what happens? You know, the child loses and the adult thinks they win, but we really don't win because we've deprived them of a growth in the development of the will. It's that waiting for the child, you know, and keeping the clear limit. If the child comes up with a third choice, that's not one of the choices. The two choices are this or this. And then if they're a toddler, we wait because it takes toddlers a while to process. You know, even getting off of a table, if they're standing on a table, feet go on the floor. So the way the language that we use is we always want to be giving the language of what ought to be happening. Montessori said the first role of the adult is to give the child the clear impression of what is good and what is evil. And it's evil with a little e. You know, what are the ways we do things? Feet go on the floor. Tables are for work and for food. Place your feet on the floor. Okay, I'm going to place your feet on the floor. No, no. Then they want, okay, feet go, okay. Now we go about the next thing. So many, I think this is probably the #1 thing that parents have come back and said, that practice alone has alleviated so many conflicts with my child or my children. The offering of two choices and then allowing the child to make the choice. Of course, does it work every time? No. Nothing works when somebody's tired, angry, hungry. You know, in those times, if the child isn't choosing, okay, mom has to choose this time. No, I want to choose. You can choose next time. Then they know you mean what you say. If you know, the child is experiencing conflicting communication. You know, if the parent has said something 2-3 times and then they change their mind, the child doesn't know where they're at. You know, I've had several parents over the years say to me, oh, you know, I've got a little manipulator on my hand, or I've got a child that's, you know, really is exhibiting bratty behavior. Well, nobody came out of the womb a manipulator. Nobody came out of the womb a brat. That's been learned behavior. And most of the time, it's just the adult that doesn't know how important it is for them to have clear limits. And at this 0 to 6, they don't need a lot of reasons. They don't, you know, Montessori said they don't need moral exhortations of why we're doing this. We just state what it is. That period comes from 6 to 12. They want to know the reasons of everything. They want the whys. Then it's, you know, the sensitive period for justice. And we have several in our classroom right now who have entered that second plane, and they are exhibiting that. They come up constantly to the adults. So-and-so did this, and they're pointing, so-and-so. They're wanting to know, is that a good behavior or a bad behavior? You know, they're at that stage. The 3- and 4-year-old doesn't do that. They just want to know the right use of things and an adult that will, you know, keep those limits firm. So this offering the choice between two goods, developing that habit is a beautiful thing, a beautiful way of cooperating with your child. Does anybody have any examples of that? I saw several heads nodding that they want to share how conflict was alleviated by the offering of choices.
We do much better getting ready for school in the morning if Joseph has full control over the order in which the tasks are done. So just offering like, okay, well, you can go put your shoes on or you can go brush your teeth. And if I tell him to do one or the other, then things don't go well. But if he gets to pick, he usually will go off and do it all by himself. And it especially helps with like independently accomplishing a task rather than whining about it and having mom or dad do it for him. So
that's a great example. That's because we talked last time about the importance of independence, that every human person has this intense desire to do for ourselves so that then we can fully give of self when we have this developed personality. If we're always dependent on another, we can't give of self. And we see children, you know, we have over the years who have been served incorrectly by an adult always doing something for them. And we see in this environment how, you know, either they will become angry or they become excessively passive because they don't feel that they can do anything. I remember a girl who was 3.5 and sat there with shoes and socks. And I walked by a couple of times and I said, do you need some help? And she said, yeah, I need you to put my socks on. And I said, you can put your own socks on. No, mommy puts my socks on. I said, you are capable of putting your sock on. And I just held one sock open and she stared at me for the longest time, then took the sock and started to put it on, and then put on the second sock and just stared at her feet. And it was obvious this was the first time she had put on her own socks, which as a Montessori teacher on the inside, I'm going, what? You know, 3.5, that's like 92. You know, they start putting on their socks when they're 14 months old. But, you know, we don't know that. Then to put on the shoes by herself, that changed that child's attitude toward the rest of the environment. Rather than sitting, she would sit for a long period of time, not making a choice. She was so used to having an adult's will substituted for her will that her will really wasn't existing yet. You know, and so then what do? We just start right where we're at. All right, you know, these are, you may do this or you may do this. And then, of course, sharing this with the parent that your child has that intense desire to do. But if in these first 3 years, if the adult keeps usurping the child's will, the child then says, oh, you know, unconsciously, I must be passive and mom or dad must be active. They're the ones who do to me. Then at 5 or 6, the parent wants the child to do for themselves and they can't. They don't have the muscular coordination, and a lot of times they've lost the desire to do. And then it's hard. It's much harder. So if we're welcoming this from the very beginning and then offering the help before giving help, this happens in the classroom all the time. A child is working with something and an older child notices them not doing it, correctly, or maybe struggling. And the older ones will come and say, can I do that with so-and-so? And we instinctively say, you can offer, you can ask if that child wants help. Or almost every time it's no, they want to do it themselves. And you see in that 6-year-old, they're just like an adult. It's killing them that the water is going everywhere. The child is pouring, but they haven't learned to stop pouring. And it's, they're looking at the adult, stop that, That's how we learn. So maybe you'd like to bring them a cloth, but even that usually gets the child very upset. They want to get their own cloth. So we just welcome those 5.5 and 6-year-olds, and we start observing, behavior with them. We start saying, let's watch what the child will do next. So then the next way, helping the child build their will and not substituting our own will for the will of the child. The next way is by eliminating punishments. Montessori said we should be raising children without the use of punishments, rewards, or verbal praise for work they attempt. And at the time that she said this in the United States, this was really crazy. She was talking in California, I think it was 1913, and punishments were very much a part of our Puritan culture. Breaking the will of the child to make it good, because their belief was that the will was not good. The will was utterly corrupted. And so it was hard. It was hard for a lot of American parents to accept this. But she said we replace punishments with relationship and with natural consequences. So we don't, rescue the child from the effects of their actions. We allow them to experience it, and then okay, let's clean it up together. Let's get the broom and the dustpan. Let's get the, whatever needs to be cleaned up. If something breaks in a Montessori classroom, we don't run out and get another thing. We say, oh, did it break? We use neutral language. We don't say, did you break it? Because most of the time the child wasn't intending. Sometimes when they get older and they're being careless, we can reflect back on their behavior. We can say, I did notice that you were moving very fast with that piece of glass, and isn't that why it broke? And I'm talking very close to the age of 6. They understand that. The 2, 3, 4-year-old, they're practicing with all of this. And so we say, did it break? And we notice, let's clean it up carefully together. Then we don't run out and get another pitcher right away or another vase. That broke. Okay, we go on with life, things break. But that says to them, that they're getting the information back from their action. So punishments, eliminating punishments, how we define a punishment is the withdrawal of a privilege, or, well, maybe I should start with corporal punishment, which I'm just going to assume nobody is using corporal punishment anymore. Sometimes people still are, but it certainly is not a practice that can be defended as a Catholic. Discipline shouldn't be violent. And for the young child, the corporal punishment is very, very damaging. We've known this for a long time. That Sophia Cavalletti talks about the metaphysical child, that the child prior to the age of reason is one with their action. And so this tiny little being who sees, like Von Balthasar said, the theologian, he said it's impossible for the young child to distinguish between parental love and divine love. The child really sees the mother and father as God, as the first face of God. These people that I came through, that I'm utterly dependent on for everything, that love me beyond, all telling, all of a sudden that same adult, strikes me, hits me. And it's not even, if the corporal punishment hurts. I've heard parents say, well, it was just a little tap, The child receives that little tap or that hit as a rejection of self. They have no possible way of saying, oh, I understand. I took the toy from my brother and that was wrong, therefore I got hit. they're stunned, and you can see this when you've seen it happen, you know, to a toddler. And the look on their face, looking at the parent, you know, there's always a better way than corporal punishment. Redirection, removal from the situation. So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that, but just in case it's out there, it's not a good practice to get into. And then, you know, we've seen in previous years when it was more common, you know, a child comes to the environment and hits, and we say, oh, people don't hit people. Mommy hits me, or daddy hits me. Oh, well, let's talk to mommy and daddy about that, you know, because we can't be doing something and then telling them not to do it. We can't hit them to change their behavior and then say that they can't hit their sibling. That's hypocritical. So it's better to just use another way, and there's a much more beautiful way. For the young child, it's just removal from the situation and stating what, you know, Michael is working with that, let's find something for your hands. You know, we don't allow, you know, like Montessori said, we stop bad behavior immediately. We don't allow a child to take something from someone else. But there's no need of punishing. We know this child is in the sensitive period for movement and coordinating their movements. They want something to work with. So we find something to work with. And it's very easy. You all know with toddlers how easy it is to distract them because they just want to be moving. Then she said also eliminating rewards, that she said in her opinion, rewards were even more damaging to the human person than punishments were, because we're identifying some part of their nature, their fallen nature, that they have a tendency to. They like food, or they like to go outside, or they like to play with a certain thing. And so the adult says, if you do this, you'll get this. And what really results in the child is anger. They want that, they want the thing, they want the carrot that's being held out there, but they don't want to do the thing for it. But that overwhelming desire for the carrot, they do it, and then there's this anger with the parent. And I've heard this, you know, many years, you know, parents that we didn't know, right? Where B.F. Skinner had a huge impact on this country. The Harvard-educated person in the 20s who said, catch the human person doing something right and reward them and praise them, and they'll keep doing the right thing, which is absolutely not true. The human person tends to do the right thing, and we don't have to say anything when they do the right thing. Going to the bathroom is a normal human function. We don't need to give a reward for pooping on the potty. We need to introduce it much earlier than we normally do. But if we look at that whole practice of rewards, you know, if we're in that, the reward needs to get bigger. And then work, the activity of itself completely gets lost. Sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. That's okay, we do them. You know, putting something back on the shelf. I remember a little boy when I asked him to go get the broom, and he said, what will you give me? Oh. And I was stunned. You know, wow, you know, there was already such a habit of, if I do something I don't want to do, I get something. You know, I get a treat, I get a reward. And I just said, great big smile. You know, he didn't really want to get the broom for a great big smile. So we went together, you know. But you can see how manipulating it is of the adult. You know, we want them to do that thing. But in the long run, it's a hard practice to get away from. And it doesn't benefit the child's will. Then also eliminating the practice of verbal praise for an attempt at work. She said work is its own reward. When the child has gotten dressed, or they've brushed their own teeth, or they've put their dish in the dishwasher, we really just don't need to say anything. Or they've thrown trash in the garbage, that's what ought to happen. We replace verbal praise, you know what she said, praise is reserved for God anyway. We replace that type of, it's another manipulation because we think we're encouraging that behavior again, but really it backfires because when the adult isn't there giving that praise, the child doesn't do the activity. The child always wants the parent's approval, always. They're hungering for our approval. So Alfie Kohn, who I mentioned a few talks ago, he's done lots of studies, even videos on children who are praised for doing these basic actions are the ones who most don't do those actions when the parent isn't there. And that's not what we want, right? We're wanting them to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing. So when they do something that way, we don't say anything about it. That's, I remember one mother saying, Maggie, I have so much more energy at the end of the day because I'm not going, woo, yay, woo, all day long that the child didn't need anyway. She just didn't know that the child wanted to do these things. But it's, developmental when their muscular system can carry out the direction of the mind. So she said we replace verbal praise for actions done with affirmation. Just loving words about who they are, not attached to any activity. That practice of saying good girl for something done, Maria Montessori said that's really a lie. They are not good because they put their dish in the dishwasher or because they were kind to their brother. They're good because they are. God created them, so they're good. And many 4-year-olds, 4.5-year-olds have said, parents have shared this with me, Daddy, am I not good if I don't do that? Because 4.5, they're very clear on what good and bad means. So if I'm told I'm good every time I do this, oh, does that mean I'm bad when I don't do that? No. So you know what? Mommy needs to change her language. You are always good. If we're already in this practice, we just stop it. And a lot of times we apologize. We say, you know what? That's not the best way to say it. The best way to say it is, I'm so glad you knew what to do. You are so intelligent. Really, we just don't need to be saying anything. But if a child is already addicted to praise, we need to wean them off of that praise. I'll stop there for a minute and just see if there are any specific, before looking at the second point, any questions or, yes?
Just two quick questions. You talked about the importance of not punishing in the context of a child doing work, but there are obviously a lot of other circumstances in which one may want to punish, for example, our 3-year-old, hitting his sister. Not with malice, but, we want to make it very clear to him very early on that you may not hit your sister. Now, that's not doing work, that's doing something else. And so I'm wondering if you could sort of comment on that. And then the second question has to do with, you talk about sort of reward. So one of the things, in the evening sometimes he just moves almost interminably slowly when it comes to, putting on his clothing and things that he's very, very capable of doing. And, we really are trying to be disciplined about getting him to bed by a certain time. And so what we'll say is, Benedict, we're not going to have time for 2 stories. We're only going to have time for 1. So it's sort of drawing a connection between the what he's doing and time and so on. But I'm wondering if you could comment on that, just as sort of a general practice.
It's a great question because it's the most basic of all situations with young children. This is okay, so punishing the child for hitting the sibling. Punishments remove the adult from looking at the reason why the behavior is happening. So why is the child hitting his sibling? We want to look at that. Most of the time, it's a normal human reaction to a sibling. Before this person came along, I had mom and dad to myself. Is having a sibling a good thing? Yeah, it's a great thing. We want them to have lots of siblings. But there's a pretty long adjustment period. Life has changed. Maria Montessori said, every time the family has a new baby, the entire family is born again. That's really an amazing statement, to be born again. Everybody's position in the family changes. Everything changes because this new human person is there. So we stop the hitting. Hands are made for helping. We're not going to hit. But to punish a child for a psychic hunger that they have or a need, Most of the time when a child is doing that, they're wanting to know, am I still your baby? Are you still here for me? Reflecting back on, I remember when you were this age. It wasn't that long ago that you were 6 months old. It's that, you know, am I still loved unconditionally, even now that this person is here? It's very, very common, but we don't ever want, you know, we don't permit it. We don't allow the child to take something from another sibling, but we have to be so sympathetic to what the child is feeling, because they can never say it consciously. You know, their whole world has changed, and it's usually not right after a baby has been born. Several, you know, another school I was in where there were moms that had lots of children. Most of them agreed that once the new baby is there, things are fine till the baby is about 4, 5, 6 months with the older sibling. That's when the older sibling tends to start, you know, acting out in our how the adult sees it. They tend to start hitting or misbehaving. There's a need there. There's a need, and we want to identify that need. As far as the time thing, when the child slows down, this is very common when another baby comes along, or even the mom is pregnant. It's fascinating. Children often know when the mother is pregnant before the mother is pregnant. And they start doing things like they know how to get themselves dressed, but they start moving at a very, very slow pace, or they'll say, I can't do it. And she said, we need to identify that as a psychic need. The child is saying, you used to do this for me, then I got bigger and I'm doing it for myself. Now, uh-oh, things are about to change. Am I still going to be your baby? So she said our attitude should be, I know you know how to put on your shoes and socks, but let's do it together. Or you want dad to do it this time, or mom to, I'll do it this time. And then it passes very quickly if we meet that need. I know you know how to walk, but you want me to carry you? Okay. And we carry them for a little while. We realize they're saying something else. And we want to meet that need. The young child, like God, is outside of time. It's impossible for them. And we still, no matter what, even though we all in this room would agree, the young child has no concept of time, we still try and talk to them about time. It's one of the biggest lessons we've got to learn. And I say we, I do it all, I catch myself all the time, and I realize he doesn't know what I'm saying, 30 minutes from now. He can't conceptualize that. So we really have to learn that lesson and say, I'm going to help you so that we can read 2 stories. Or if, we dressed slowly this time, so tonight we'll read 1 story. But we really should try and leave time out of it because they just don't understand. It's okay that they move slowly. And remember, Montessori said the 2 things that prevent the adult from seeing the child as Christ sees the child is pride and anger. We have a time frame in our mind. We want bedtime because it's good for the child to happen at this time. Plus, I want time with my spouse while the child's in bed. We want that to happen. She said we've got to cultivate humility and kindness. Yeah, we're going to try and meet that bedtime, but we don't need to give a lot of reasons. If we've decided there's 1 book for tonight, there's 1 book. To ask them to be able to reflect on how much time, they just can't do it. We make that limit and we follow through. No, I want 2 books. 2 books tomorrow night. Period. You don't need to give lots of reasons.
When should you start explaining those things? So when do they start to understand that, yeah, if you don't get your pajamas on by yourself, you can't stay up and read a chapter book or whatever the... 5, around 5, 5.5, they start to get very clear on it. And you see, they start, you'll just see it. They'll start saying things and they become very interested in the clock. Mm-hmm. And gosh, we've got 3 right now so interested in the clock and how much time has passed and how they're arriving at that awareness, and it's beautiful. You can tell when they're totally not interested in it when you, begin to give the reasons of things. I love when children do this, and they're just looking at you and they walk away. Way too much information. They don't need it. They can't take it in. Okay.
We didn't need to give all those words. We just need, this is what's going to happen.
We have many of the same conversations in our house, and I feel like at 4.5, it works 2 nights a week, and then the other 3 nights it doesn't, and it's totally unpredictable to me what night I say, oh, if you go put your pajamas on by yourself, we'll read Mr. Popper's Penguins, or whatever the current thing is that he wants to do. And he goes upstairs and he does it, and then the next night, he doesn't. And
inconsistent behavior until really close to 6, until they really arrived at that level of development. It's just like when a child sits through a mass one time and you think, wow, we've arrived. And the next week, they are down. And, you know, that behavior is, that's why it's that bright flaming red. It's here 1 minute, it's not the next. And then it becomes very consistent from 6 to 12.
so is it worth continuing to try to make that explanation? Or
You know, briefly,
just not ready?
I think, I don't think the child needs it. I don't think it is a damaging thing, but it's not something they need, you know. I think it's a really good practice for us as adults to try, maybe in our prayer time, to really try and put ourselves in a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old's mindset. What really is it like to only be present to the present moment? Which is what we're all trying to arrive at. But what is that really like? Not anticipating what's going to happen in 30 or 45 minutes. Really living. You see this every day in the hallway. Putting on shoes and boots and coat. Something gets their interest and they are there 10, 15 minutes trying to, you know, and you're, okay, half the group is already at the door ready to go to the park, but you've got 2 that have become completely interested in this Velcro strip or these new laces, or what do? You know, and every day it's something different. If there's an extra adult, sometimes we go over and we say, I'm sorry, we can't look at this right now. I know it's very interesting, but you have to come with the rest of the group. And we apologize, and if they cry, if they get upset, I am sorry. That was interesting, but we can't do it right now. So we just, very brief explanation, we sympathize, we empathize, and then we go on with what has to happen. Any other questions?
When they kind of transition to the 6 to 12-year-old, is the will really developing anymore, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our will develops, you know, throughout our life, but now they have the ability to obey. If you know, deviations haven't been, and most children, we all have some type of deviations. Montessori wrote a lot about psychic deviations that get sown in the first 6 years of life, either, you know, extremely being prevented from moving, an adult's will constantly being substituted. If anybody's interested afterwards, we can, you know, talk some more about deviations. But if the child doesn't have strong deviations from 6 to 12, they are happy to obey. Now they do want the reasons. You know, and they're in that sensitive period for justice, and they want to talk about things. And this is when, you know, when there's been a violation of a family rule, we sit down and we have a conversation with them, and we talk about, this is what we do in this family, this is what happened, what do you think should happen? And it really is fascinating. So many parents have told me they came up with something so much worse than we ever would have come up with. You know, they said, well, I think I should have to do, oh, okay. That's not what I was going to say, you know, but it becomes this discussion. Okay, sorry.
I'm just having trouble finding the line between setting limits and introducing negative consequences. And I'll just give you an example. I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and at night I read to them. And I just found that they were kind of going through this very squirmy phase. And I just said, guys, this is an important time of the night, and anybody who can't, you know, sit down next to mommy and get covered up with the blanket and read the book, you know, daddy's gonna come in and it'll be time for bed. And it worked really, really well. And now we have this like beautiful time where we're sitting together. So I'm tempted to think of that as limit setting. At the same time, I have introduced this negative consequence for a behavior that I'm trying to prevent. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of speak to
I don't think that's a negative consequence.
Okay.
I mean, you know, in a Montessori classroom, when we gather for a group, this is how we sit in a group, and we show them how. If you would like to join the group, this is how we sit. If a child starts, you know, doing other things, we say, it's time to leave the group. You know how to sit in a group. You do not have to join the group. That's the limit. You're not allowed to ruin it for somebody else, you know, which isn't their intention, you know, but that is what happens, so we don't allow that to happen. I think that same thing is happening. The book time is over, and they have the ability. You wouldn't have said that to a 13-month-old, you know, or that would be impossible. But they do have the ability to, and they love silence, they love being read to. It's appealing to that desire to be able to control myself, to enjoy a book. I don't see that as a negative consequence. It's a good example. Any other? Yeah.
So my young boy, he's 15 months, and he's really just starting to like gain his independence, and so he loves to like, you know, move the Swiffer around and the broom and stuff. It's really adorable because it's like twice his height. And I guess the most challenging is probably at teeth brushing time, where he wants to do it himself because, you know, he's seen me do it enough times and he's like, I can do it myself. But he can put it in his mouth and move it around, but you know, he's not really adequately addressing the hygiene need. And so I have to get in there, of course, and then there's like, you know, yeah. And so what I started doing, like just in the last week or two, is like getting really excited when I do it, and he's kind of just like, why is she so excited? And he's just kind of like watching me. But then when you describe the idea of like, you know, praising a situation and, you know, the negative consequences of that, like over time, but I really just need to get in there and brush his teeth. So what do I do?
Yeah, I wonder if you tried making it a cooperation. For example, when we start feeding a child with a spoon, when they're finished nursing, the Montessori approach is the mom has a spoon and the baby has a spoon. And the baby's practicing and they're going, you know, and then mom takes a turn. We take turns. So maybe if there's 2 little toothbrushes, you know, can I do this side? Let's you take a turn and I'll take a turn, and go back and forth and see if he responds to that. Because yeah, there are just certain things that have to get done. We want to welcome that he wants to do it. You're going to be really happy in a couple of years that he likes brushing his teeth. But the teeth have to get brushed. So we just try and cooperate. Now can I take a turn? Now your turn. I see food. Look, you know, and draws attention to what's happening, what's coming off. Whenever we try and cooperate, it's usually much better than. Yes.
When do you think potty training should start?
That's a whole talk in and of itself. The first experience, I mean, just really quick, is around 6 months. Whenever the child is sitting well, we give the first experience on a potty. We just take the diaper off and we wait, and at some point something will happen. And yes, look, urine went in the toilet. That's what we do, and the diaper goes back on. Around between 9 and 10 months, they have a sensitive period for toileting, and they want to watch everybody else in the family going. And we should welcome that. This is long before the sensitive period for modesty happens. So they're fascinated at what happens in there. This is what we do in our culture. We use a toilet. This is toilet paper. We flush. We wash our hands. Off to the next thing. So we're welcoming that interest, and then we keep giving them the experience. But in the United States, we wait way too late, and then it becomes a big fight because they're peaking for independence between 2, 2.5. So most other cultures begin, you know, well before the age of 1, because they are capable of it. So, and then every child is different. I've worked with many children who were completely toilet and independent at 13, 14, 15 months. Really amazing. I mean, not every child, and some had the experience early on. They chose not to till around the age of 3. So, but if we're allowing them to have the cause and effect, you know, if we're using these new disposable diapers that whisk away every effect from, you know, their body just did something, and now they're not receiving the effect of it. That's you know, that's hard. So we can put underpants on inside the diaper so that they do feel, when I do this release, then I feel wetness. And I don't want it, you know, if you're not willing to do the cloth diaper or whatever, you know, at least they're getting the effect, but that is a long. We can do a time on 0 to 3, but I want to get to the next practice of that Dr. Montessori really encouraged adults, and this is to me the most helpful of all, is mastering the neutral moment. Not trying to have that conversation or to address the child's behavior in the moment of, you know, when they're extremely upset. And this is for any age. It's the same with the spouse, right? You go to those marriage classes that, you know, don't discuss anything when you're hungry, tired, angry, all those things. Wait until you're both on top of your game. So addressing the child's behavior long after it's happened. And when the child is in a good mood, on top of their game, I want to share with you what happened. Yesterday at dinner time, or yesterday morning, this happened. And we just recount it. If this happens again, this is what will happen. Okay, and the child understands it. Or they can say, you know, how they felt. But trying to do it in the moment, it, you know, almost never works. So that mastering the neutral moment. One of the recent ones a mom shared with me is an adolescent who was having a friend over, and every time this particular friend came over, she got very different toward the mother, very rude, very, just kind of took on a whole different persona, and the mother was really surprised by it, and then did this in the neutral moment and said, I want to, and you know, reflected the girl's behavior to her, and it came out that this girl really wanted this other girl's friendship, and that was how that girl spoke to her mother. And then they had this whole talk about it. It was really beautiful. So rather than just correcting the behavior, having that discussion and finding out why that 13-year-old was acting that way, and then to say, you know, do you think that's a beautiful, loving relationship? You know, and then the girl was able to say, no, but this girl was so popular, she wanted her, you know, friendship. So that neutral moment, and we can do it with so many things. I know we've done that with whining in the Montessori classroom. You know, when the child is not whining, we'll gather 2 or 3 children and we'll say, listen. And they usually start laughing and we say, did you hear what I said? No, I know. That's called whining. We can't understand when people whine. We'll wait and we'll use our full words. And they just think it's hilarious. And we might need to do it a couple of times again, but the beauty of this environment, there's 30 children, once 3 or 4 children have that knowledge, they share it with the other. You're whining. Stop whining. A 3-year-old takes it from a 5-year-old much easier than from an adult. And they just get out of that habit. You know, we want to help them build these healthy habits, but they do have to do it for themselves. But we want to give the knowledge and then give the ability to practice and then, you know, follow through with those neutral moments. So I see we're over time. I think we have time for a couple of more questions if there are.
I got a question.
Yeah.
For us, like probably the most busiest time of the day is in the morning, right? Mm-hmm. So getting everyone up and getting them in the moment and being like really happy
Patient.
And to get ready for school
Yeah.
is probably one of the most challenging times because it's like we have minimum time to get dressed, get in the car, and be at school on time. Mm-hmm. So everything has to be coordinated and everyone has to cooperate, and if someone's not cooperating, then we don't get out the door in time, and then we're late, and there's a whole lot of other things that are associated with that. Mm-hmm. So in order to be able to do that, I have to do a lot to help them, right, get dressed and put things on, and but from what you're saying is that, see, that's a routine we do every day, mm-hmm. where I'm like putting the socks on, putting underwear on, putting the pants on, you know, shirt and everything. And then it's like, okay, you put all this on, now you can lay down for 5 minutes. And we get breakfast, right? And then, but thinking about what you were saying is that, I mean, because it's a routine that's done every day, and I'm doing it for them every day, I mean, how much of an impact does that have on the child? I mean,
yeah, I would look at, you know, bedtime the night before. Is morning, is it, you know, I mean, there are definitely certain people who are not morning people. And they're not going to be morning people their whole lives. I mean, there are people like that. They just, you know, the whole biological clock thing with, you take your temperature, there's a test out there you can take, you know, that predicts. But with young children, if you can, you know, ease back on bedtime so that it's earlier, you know, so they're getting it, so it's not so hard to wake them up. That's one thing, you know, you can try doing that, giving more movement so that at bedtime, you know, they're tired. But I think for especially a Montessori classroom, many parents have said we have so many conflicts in the morning because we've got to get the child here on time. It's not that important that they are here. It's more important if they're wanting to do for themselves slowly that they come later. And I'm thinking of your child. You know, there might be another child that I would say it's more important for that child to be here, right, because of the way they respond to others coming in, that it's really important for them to be right here at 8 o'clock. If he's wanting to do some things for himself and he just needs more time, I take that time because he's not going to need that much time very much longer. You know, once they master getting dressed and they do it for themselves, it seems like it's taking a long time now, but they're still in the learning phase. So I would, as much as they want to cooperate, I would allow them to cooperate and then just come a little bit later. I know one dad who, and not in this school, but the morning thing was such a big deal. He said to his son, let's put on the uniform the night before. And the child, he came every morning, he slept in his uniform. He woke up dressed, and I said, that's really a great idea. Why not? You know, it was just no conflict. The child got up, went to the bathroom, went down for breakfast. I never would have thought of it. They had 5 children, and this was the youngest, and the child was totally fine with it. You know, the pants were a little wrinkled, but so what? You know, he didn't care. So, you know, think outside the box. Then there was other children who absolutely were adamant, I'm not going to get, you know, and this happened several times at several different schools. The mom said, it's such a conflict. I said, bring them in their pajamas. Bring them in their pajamas. You bring the uniform and say, you can have Miss Maggie get you dressed. And the child, every time it happened, the child was absolutely stunned. They came in their pajamas, they see everybody else in the uniform, and I said, let's go into the bathroom. And the next morning, they got dressed. You know, that's not such a bad thing. I mean, I think it's more important for it to be positive and for there to be peace, you know, than it to be this feeling of, you know, there's that great book, The Hurried Child, you know, when we think of how much, you know, of their day is hurried and out of their control, the more that we can take to go slowly and be patient, you know, very soon they're going to be in that second plane and they're a totally different child. They're dressing in 10 seconds. They're wanting to get there to be with their friends. It passes by quickly. When you're in it in the day-to-day, it doesn't feel like it. But it does. And, yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for, like, actual defiance? Like, you've said something that no, you can't touch the oven while it's hot or whatever, and the kid looks at you and does it anyway. How would you suggest responding to that? Besides the fact that you now have a burn on your finger.
Yeah, that was hot, wasn't it?
But there are times when it's not, like, there's not quite such a natural consequence that occurs for the defiant behavior.
We have to stop the behavior. I'm telling you this because I love you. Mm-hmm. I want what's best for you. And then we stop the behavior. I cannot let you do that. I cannot let you run across the street. You could get hurt. I cannot let you do that because I love you. I mean, I've said I would not be a good adult if I allowed you to do that. You know, I'm thinking of a situation of a child who never cleaned up after themselves. I would not be a good adult to allow you to stay in that habit. That's not going to serve you well later in life. I wouldn't say that part to them, but that's why we're really doing it. When we're doing these things out of love, we want them in those good habits because they're going to be happier. That builds a happier, more stable, more interdependent adult. It's not for us. You know, I think the more we can, you know, really do things out of love and not out of our own convenience, you know, then it's very easy to make those limits and to just say, nope, can't do that because I love you too much.
And if they try to do that again, do you?
I'm stopping removing.
You just remove.
Yeah, it's just like running in a classroom. You know, you may walk, they choose to run. I'm stopping your body. It's not safe to run inside. They keep trying. I'm going to hold you, and we hold very firm until you are ready to walk in this environment. Will not allow you to run. Yes.
I want to ask if you have any recommendations for teaching empathy, particularly in regards to discipline in a way, to, you know, for inter-child relationships, and when and how you include that, I guess.
I mean, my thought is we don't have to teach empathy. You know, I don't think we should expect it in the first plane of development, because what the human person is doing is building their self. We will see moments of empathy and sympathy on the part of a child, but their whole being is constructing this person. They're not so worried with those other people. You know, they will be very soon, but they have to build a self. So their whole focus is building themselves. You know, we model it naturally. They see us, you know, being empathetic. And in an environment like this, where it's multi-age, they learn from one another. If one child is being rough with an insect or an animal, other children immediately, don't do that. Don't do that. You know, when we find an insect in the classroom, we don't kill it. We catch it and we put it outside. You know, maybe the child doesn't know that yet, and they're going, you know, the other children stop them. But we don't expect, I think it's just not expecting it, but it definitely comes if they're living in a warm, loving environment. It's just like the, which I forgot to mention, you know, we don't, in Montessori, she said we should never force a child to say please or thank you, and certainly not I'm sorry. We really need to stop that practice. And this just happened recently. A child had done a behavior, and the teacher went to talk to the mother, and the child's just 3, and the mother said, oh, say you're sorry, and the child said, sorry. That means nothing. You know, the behavior didn't change. That feeling sorrow, feeling gratitude, or feeling remorse is a movement of the soul, and we can't force somebody to have a movement of the soul. We model saying please and thank you. When the child feels gratitude, they usually say something else. They usually hug us, or they usually give a big smile. In the neutral moment, we can say, when we go to the grocery store, when we go wherever we're going, you know, we prepare the child. In our culture, when somebody does something for us, we say thank you. And if in the moment the child remembers, great. If not, it's the same thing that Alfie Kohn saw. The parent that's there saying, say thank you, the child never says thank you when the parent isn't there. We don't want that. So that means they're doing it for us. They're not really feeling that, you know, and it in a way it teaches them to lie. You know, say you're sorry. The child might not be sorry at all. You know, that, and so in Montessori classroom, we'll say what we bring the 2 children together and we say, what would you like to say? What would you like to say? And very often we find out, oh, that action was precipitated by this action that we didn't see. Oh. And we just go back and forth. What would you like to say? What would you? And it's over for them. Let's go back to work. You know, very often we project our adult feelings on how, you know, we would feel if we'd gotten hit or somebody had taken things. It's very different. They get over things so quickly. They know they're in that period of development. Well, any other? Yes.
You mentioned something about a book. There's a...
Combs.
Punished by Rewards.
Okay.
That's a great book by Alfie Kohn. The Trouble with A+, Gold Stars, and Incentive Plans. It is really an excellent book. He also wrote The Homework Myth. That's another. He's written a lot of books. The other one I really highly recommend too is called Unconditional Parenting. That's a beautiful. Yes.
How do you spell blessing?
Kohn. Thank you all for coming. The next talk, I'm not sure what the date will be on the spiritual life of the young child and how the adult assists in that natural progression. Thanks for coming.